Guten Morgen, good morgon, good morning. It's 10 o'clock in Stockholm, Sweden. My name is Martin Glatz. I'm the head of Advantage Austria in Stockholm, covering the markets of Finland, Norway, and Sweden. This webinar is dedicated to the Swedish food and beverage market. It will be conducted in English for the sake of our presenters who know a lot about their areas of expertise. They also speak excellent English and Swedish, but not all of them German. So bear with us. This webinar will be conducted in English. The topic of the webinar, I think, is quite timely, especially in times of lockdowns and people working from home. Of course, the appetite for food is still there. And we are going to convince you throughout the webinar that the appetite of Swedes for food is for more than just the cinnamon buns, the kanelbulle, the Zimtschnecken you saw on the slide before we started this webinar. This webinar is one of a series of platforms, of events, of activities we from the Austrian Foreign Trade Organization, from our office here in Stockholm, are offering to you to make sure that you can present your products in the best way possible in the Swedish market. At this time, actually November, the Nordic Organic Food Fair should have taken place. It was cancelled for obvious reasons. It will take place though next year. There's a date set, and we all hope that it will be a live event again for the 17th and 18th of November 2021. We hope that many of you will join our group pavilion there, the Austrian group pavilion, which has been growing over the years and provided an excellent platform for our suppliers of food and beverage items. The Nordic Organic Food Fair, NOF in short, as an important specialized food fair in this area. We also plan for the first quarter of next year an Austrian showcase, either an online event or a virtual event. And we're also already preparing for a digital wine tasting in the first half of next year. So plenty of activities which we will hope that you will join. In between, of course, we're always there for you. We are providing individual answers to all the problems you might have, to all the questions you might have concerning the placement of your products in the Swedish market. We don't only have platforms, activities, we also have an expert here, Joachim Völkle, one of my colleagues here in the Stockholm office. And without much further ado, Joachim, I will hand over to you now.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you for the nice introduction and your warm words. Good morning also from my side, and also from my side, of course, a warm welcome to all you, ladies and gentlemen, in the audience. Today's webinar has been received quite well. We are thrilled to see quite an audience, quite a crowd out there. We have been seeing registrations of about 100 Austrian firms, which is incredible, and we are thrilled to see that. As you, we are, of course, eager to learn more on the Swedish food and beverages sector. And we are just about to do that. But before that, especially, I think, in years of global pandemics, it makes sense that we emphasize that we are your partner, your experts on the Swedish market for food and drinks. Or in other words, we are your link from Austria to Sweden. However, it is quite obvious that we cannot have detailed knowledge on every single aspect of the Swedish food and drinks market. You should say that's a fact. Obviously, no problem. That's not an issue. As long as you know whom to ask, that's fine, right? And for this reason, we have invited 4 excellent experts for today's session. And they will contribute to, for sure, a really good presentation. We will kick off our session today with a presentation from Johan Jörgensen, who is the founder and CEO of Sweden Food Tech. Sweden Food Tech is a hub that accelerates innovation for the future of food. Johan will then, in further detail, explain how the food sector is about to develop with respect to topics like digitization, of course, sustainability, but also health. Sweden Food Tech is, by the way, also the organizer of a truly amazing food festival in the middle of Stockholm that attracts every year hundreds of thousands visitors and focuses on next generation food, next gen food. The next gathering will hopefully for all of us be held in June 21. After that, we had planned to have Niklas Talevski from ICA on the webinar today. Niklas is sales manager in one of the big ICA Quantum stores in Malmö. Unfortunately, Niklas was diagnosed with COVID-19 recently, and he cannot be with us in the webinar today, what we of course apologize for. But I will present his slides that we were lucky to get anyways instead of Niklas, and I really hope you bear with me if I should not be able to answer all of your questions on the topic of ICA, the biggest retailer in the Swedish market. Besides, I'm confident that Niklas will recover soon and support us with the remaining questions even after the webinar. After that, we move on with Maria Vanauskas from Business Sweden. Maria is an export manager, and she will provide you with an overview on the Swedish consumer. As a manager at the Try Swedish Export program, Maria has unique expertise when it comes to the Swedish consumer, and this is for sure extremely helpful information for you, ladies and gentlemen. Our panel for today will then already be concluded by Matilda Danetun from the state-owned alcohol monopoly Systembolaget. Matilda is responsible purchaser for Austrian wines and many others, of course. She will explain us how Systembolaget works and what this means for you in the wine sector. So, with not much further ado, I would like to ask Johan Jörgensen from Sweden Food Tech now to take over and start his presentation on trends and innovations in the Swedish food market. Welcome, Johan. The floor is yours.
Welcome to my part of the world, and welcome to Food and Tech in Sweden. Let me walk you through a short introduction to the Swedish food tech scene, which of course is no longer a fringe movement, but kind of a core to everything that's happening currently in the food sector in Sweden. So food and tech has really emerged here. Sorry again, some of my slides, just so you know, are in Swedish, but they're also meant to provide you with some information that you can ponder with the help of Google Translate in your own offices once this is over. And as Joachim said, the slides will be made available to you. So then, what is food tech in Sweden, and what is Sweden Food Tech? Joachim briefly mentioned this, and what we do is that we build next-gen food tech companies or next-gen food companies, because in the future, as we all know, all companies are tech companies, especially food as well. And we work with small companies and large companies alike in order to help them get to the next level. And mind you, as in Sweden, as almost everywhere else in the world, food companies aren't too used to tech, but they will become used to tech. My own background is tech. That's from where I come. And I've seen over the years a fantastic sector, the food sector that is, with so much you can do with the help of tech in order to gain the upper hand over your competition or to reach the consumers. As Joachim also said, we do a lot of stuff, but let's first of all mention what we recently did together with one of the second largest retailer here in Sweden. It's called the Bloomer Accelerator, where we together with the sustainability foundation called Norskin accelerated a bunch of companies, not just for the sake of the entrepreneurs, but actually for the sake of the connection between the entrepreneurs and the big corp, in this case, the Co-op group. And why is that important? Well, it's because innovation seldom happens within the large companies, and they will be forced to, so to say, import innovation into their organization coming from the entrepreneurs. So they start to engage with the entrepreneurs now. So if you have innovative parts of yourself, that's going to be as interesting to these companies that you want to do business with as perhaps your products. Personally, I always say that data is the new food, and without data, there is no food, because how are you supposed to plug a food object into a modern world without a lot of data? And we'll get back to that later on. As Joachim also said, we run one of the largest food festivals on the planet. It's called the Smaka Good Food Festival. And every non-COVID year, it attracts something like 400,000 people during a week to a downtown park in Stockholm, where all the top chefs are present, and we really let people taste the future. It's a magnificent test bed. And of course, the Stockholmers are a really interesting bunch of people when it comes to the next-gen food system. Because they are health obsessed, they are super sustainable, they're really change-minded, and they love tech and new stuff. Which of course brings us to the question of what is it that we are trying to do as well with Sweden Food Tech, besides serving food? It's of course serving knowledge as well. So we run something called the Sweden Food Tech Big Meet in connection with the Big Food Festival every year, where we bring in the greatest minds from all around the planet in order to talk about the next-gen food system. And the good news is, it's free for all. It's English. And if you can participate in this webinar, you can participate in the big meet as well. Sorry to say, though, we just held one in September, but it will be back in June next year in connection with the big food festival. So welcome to Sweden. What defines Sweden and the next-gen food system? I would say there are a couple of things. To the right, Greta Thunberg, of course, the magnificent, I think she's 17 now. She was 16 when she started the School Strikes for the Future. She's helped redefine our picture or our mental images on what we need to do in order to save the climate. And of course, food is the climate. To the left, we have Therese Lindgren, one of Sweden's leading influencers. And she has probably been the most important person in the Swedish food sector over the past few years, because she has almost single-handedly converted 25% of all Swedish women, the younger part of them, to consider themselves vegan or vegetarian. And of course, both Greta and Therese are the key source behind Oatly and the magnificent success it's had, not just in this country as a development hub for next-gen food products, but also all around the world, because Oatly learned pretty rapidly here how to behave in a digital influencer-backed world. Now, this is the level on which I think mostly Therese, who is, by the way, not food tech blogger or anything. She's a beauty YouTuber, but she also loves animals, and she's super engaged in animal rights. And so she told basically all her followers, which are many, 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 that let's do it for the animals and go vegan. And if you can read Google trends diagrams, you know that the top point in the diagram is index 100, and then you count backwards from that. If you take a look, say, 7 years ago, you could say that the index was basically at 10. So over a couple of years, Therese Lindgren and a bunch of other influencers and general trends in the market exploded tenfold the interest for vegan and vegetarian. LOHAS, learn that term. It's lifestyle of health and sustainability. About 40% of the Swedish population, which is what it says in the diagram, consider themselves leading a lifestyle of health and sustainability. That's the highest number in the world. And of those, it's mostly women, aged somewhere between mid-30s and late 50s, with incomes over 300,000 Swedish kronor, roughly 30,000 euros per year. Affluent urbanites, those are the ones that really are moving the needle here. We also have a tech nation. Sweden is consistently ranked one of the highest, tech maturities out there in the world, and this of course spills over into all sectors. I think when we rehearsed ahead of this seminar, I found it kind of amusing that there was a question posed regarding how fast our broadbands were, if it was supposed to support video and audio. It's like, yeah, nobody asks that question here. It's taken for granted that you have ample audio and video bandwidth, and that you are tech savvy. How could it be another way? It also is a pretty liberal country. You must also understand that this is a country of no traditions whatsoever, especially when it comes to food. We didn't eat food for most of the part of history. We ate something else that kept us alive. And we recently discovered food. So we don't have any backpacks filled with old traditions that we need to adhere to. Instead, we jump on trends like nobody else. This is another diagram, sorry, in Swedish. It says 9 out of 10 have changed their behaviors in the stores due to COVID in one or another way. And of course, it's everything from keeping the distance, which is the top bar at 77%, but also going to say, no, I go more seldom to the store. And and I plan my purchases in a better way than before. Of course, that requires information, and you go over to e-shopping. You can also see what Swedes love to do. This is a pretty, again, complicated diagram to digest in a few seconds in a presentation. But again, take it home and read it for yourselves. What do people love to think about when it comes to food in Sweden? Where it comes from? Absolutely. That is super essential. What it costs? Nah, not that important. Safety issues around food? No, we take them for granted. What it tastes like? We haven't developed those taste buds thanks to our lack of tradition. But we're keen on nutrition, and we're super keen compared to the rest of Europe when it comes to ethics around food production. So please bear that in mind. If you can bring ethics to the market and sell ethics, you're well positioned. We have 3 large retailers, and I'm sure Maria will get back to this later on. And the biggest one is, of course, ICA, which you were supposed to have heard about from Niklas. But since he's not here, I can yap a little about them. So ICA is the biggest by far. It's a behemoth, and everyone thinks that their fortune is made if they can get into the shelves of ICA. Not so true. ICA are also famous for beating down entrepreneurs or sellers of food to them on price, and eventually to steal their ideas and turn them into their own products. All of the big ones do the same thing to certain different degrees. Again, this is a mapping of the large stores and where in Sweden they are most prevalent. So again, you can take this home to Google Translate and understand a bit more about your positioning. I would say that your positioning is an interesting question if you're going to go into the Swedish market. My recommendation for basically everyone is that, no, don't try the big retailers. Try the other ones instead. All those new online players that are coming up and about. The ones that's called mat.se or food.se in Swedish, Mathem, the packaged food solutions, or the like Linas Matkasse, HelloFresh, IKEA, not forget about them. They're always on the lookout for new interesting product to push through their networks, and then not just in Sweden, but globally. Amazon and CDON. Amazon just entered the Swedish market, so you can sell food through them to the Swedes. CDON, which is an online retailer of electronics and books. They also sell food products. There are a bunch of special niche players. Of course, restaurants is another gigantic market in Sweden, but not as much as it was last year. It's really taken a horrible, smack in the face, and I'm sure that's the case everywhere else in Europe as well. But that has meant that a lot of the top chefs and really good restaurants out there are suddenly game because they don't have anything to do, and they're looking for the next gen survival or their next gen development. Interesting market, actually. And of course, the public sector procures a lot of food, roughly 10 billion Swedish kronor a year. They serve 3 million meals per day, every second meal outside the home in the public sector. That's another potential venue for you guys to reach out to. Now, in-store sales growth, of course, the pandemic has meant the boom for sales of food because, hey, what are we supposed to spend our money on elsewhere or otherwise, especially online? You can see the e-commerce growth has been 70%. People have just jumped on that train, and they're not going back after COVID. They're going to stick with e-commerce. And let's take a look at what type of data you need then when you go e-commerce. This is one of my favorite pictures, again, in Swedish. I've stolen this with pride from Coop. They nowadays require for all their goods that they're taking in that you can declare on 10 different factors where the food comes from and what it does. So it's, let's do them clockwise from 12 o'clock, biodiversity, climate, fertility of the land that grown the product, the usage of water in growing the product, the usage of pesticides, have you used too much of nutrients when you grow the things, animal health, working conditions, how does this support the local population, and how well can you trace the product? And all that together gives a picture that they will display on all their food items so that we can guide the consumers to better decisions. Because after all, it's not just food that you eat. It could be climate. It could be living conditions for the ones growing the food. And that's type of a mind shift that you will see tech support to 100%. And this has led to a bunch of new companies that you also could take into consideration entering the market. This is a company called Foodla. They're helping farmers to put data on their products, everything from data to pictures, and then make sure then that those data sets and pictures can populate the online stores out there. In this case, they work very closely together with the Coop group. And but they're also working with other companies out there as well. So if you're going to get into the market, one way is actually to go into the market through the tech and data side of things, as opposed to trying to sell your products to the big retailers the traditional way, because that's it's a hell of a job, and there are shortcuts you can take. Another shortcut I'd like to point you to is a company called Stockfiller. And Stockfiller helps all the store managers out there to order goods that are not in the central warehouses of the chain, but perhaps sits with individual sellers out there. And as you know, it's pretty tricky to get to the mind share of the store managers when when they're supposed to order specifically your honey jars or whatever it is that you try to sell to them. You have to make it convenient to them. And in this case, Stockfiller has built up a database of food items and made it as easy to order them for a store manager as it is to order them from the central warehouse of that chain. Another very good way of publishing your food so it becomes available for the ones out there eventually moving your goods into the shelves of the retail stores. But it's not just them. Sweden is filled with a bunch of new food tech companies. This is just an example of some of them, and they can be found in all various aspects of the value chain. some of them have excellent connections and are going forward with their products, and could also be a way of reaching the market, joining forces with others who want to achieve the same thing as you want to achieve. And mind you, it's not always just sales. It's a quest to build a better food system and a better food planet. And that's a central part of the thinking of all these new companies out there, but also of the consumers in Sweden. And mind you, they are tech savvy, and it's a heterogeneous group of people. In Sweden, another strategy that merges very well with digital is, of course, the fact that of the 10 million Swedes, about 3 million of them have a foreign background. And those are, of course, underserved severely when it comes to food that they want to have on their tables. So again, another way of slicing the market that tech has helped us to achieve. And tech will just continue to do that. And if you start thinking data and reaching these groups, I think you will have a bountiful future in the wonderful country of Sweden. Thank you so much. And over to you, Joachim.
Thank you very much, Johan, for this fantastic presentation and for those impressions you gave about the widespread Swedish market. Obviously, there are so many other players besides the big retailers, and I'm really grateful that you also took over some of the comments to the biggest retailers. Of course, thank you also for the reference to the big meat events. I think this is an excellent opportunity also for you, ladies and gentlemen, in the audience. So have a look on look for big meat events later after the webinar. And then I think what sticked out most from your presentation, Johan, was the shortcuts into the market. Do not only think sales, but also things like tech, of course, and ethics are really important for the Swedish market, obviously. But we will learn more about the Swedish consumer later in the presentation from Maria, because she is obviously a well-known expert for this topic. Before that, I will give you, as promised, a little introduction about the still biggest leading grocery retailer in Sweden, ICA. And even though I agree with you, Johan, there is multiple different approaches and alternatives to get into the market besides ICA. ICA still is the dominant player, I think. We can agree on that. There are other big players as well. You mentioned some of those, Johan. That was Coop, but also Axfood with Willys and Hemköp. Some of you might be familiar with those already. Then, of course, Lidl is gaining ground also in Sweden, in contrast to other markets like Norway, where they didn't succeed, but they do in Sweden. These are just some of the biggest players. Niklas Zaleski, as I said, cannot be with us today, unfortunately, because of his COVID-19 infection. But let me give you some brief facts on ICA. ICA is, as I said, still the leading grocery retailer on the Swedish market, and it's obvious. You see ICA everywhere. There are about 1,300 stores of different sizes. I will go into that later on. More than 8,000 employees. It's a market share, depending on which statistics you take, between 40 and 50%. Definitely more than 36, says ICA itself. But what is special about ICA is the business model, obviously. It depends on ICA retailers that are independent. You could say they own and operate their own stores. And with this, they can tailor their concepts and offers to a local demand. So there might be differences depending on the region in Sweden when it comes to the concepts that you see in the stores. There is, of course, a central organization behind ICA as well. When it comes to expansion, when it comes to sourcing or marketing and logistics, they, of course, collaborate. And then as I just said, there are 4 different ICA stores. And if you have been to Sweden before, maybe, then you might have seen one or more of those, and you might have been wondering, what's the difference? Well, it's pretty easy. Well, if we start from the larger entities, we take the ICA Maxi. It says stormarknad, which is a Swedish expression for like the biggest big market, so to say. Everything is offered under one roof. It's a wide assortment, and it's not only food, obviously. And I think this is also something that signifies a trend, that you do not only get food, but you get non-food articles as well. That can be housewares, that can be entertainment, that can be garden supplies, everything. This is like the biggest entities. On the other end of the scale, we have ICA Nära, right in the bottom. And ICA Nära has, as you can see, a bunch of stores, more than 630 stores. That's the small convenience store around the corner, where you find more than you expect, but still the product range might be narrower than in the ICA Quantum or the ICA supermarket, of course. It's a smaller store, but still you see them everywhere. I mean, you have to distribute 600 stores in a country like Sweden. You can easily imagine. You find them behind every corner, literally. Then we have ICA Quantum, and this is basically the employer or the store that is that ICA, that Niklas, our presenter for those slides, is working for as a sales manager in Malmö. We know each other quite well. We have been cooperating also last year, but the years before, with our group stand when we are in Malmö, with our group stand at the Nordic Organic Food Fair. As Martin said in the introduction, we do store checks and we go to ICA, of course. And some of you might have been with us when Niklas showed us around in his ICA Quantum store last year, and he does that in a brilliant way, interactive way. So I'm really sorry once again that he cannot be with us today, but there might be new options next year. We heard that already, that the Nordic Organic Food Fair is planned for the 17th and 18th of November 21. And I had a call with our contact person of the Nordic Organic Food Fair, the NOF, yesterday. And she assured me that they do just everything to make sure we will have a NOF 21. Of course, in those times with a global pandemic, we cannot be 100% sure, but everything is done to make it. And then as a last of the 4 store profiles, we have ICA Supermarket. The ICA Supermarket is the supermarket that you would expect. It has a strong emphasis on personal service with a wide range of food. And it's really a wide range of food. You would find simply everything you need for everyday meals, but also for special occasions. If we move on, once again, we have to speak about COVID a little bit, even though we don't want to overemphasize this topic today, but it's interconnected, of course. And if we talk about ICA in times of the COVID pandemic, it's not a problem for ICA because we see a massive volume growth in those turbulent times. If we just take the period from October 20 to January to October 2020, we have a sales increase of about 7.4%. 4% compared to the same period last year. This was even more now in October, when probably more flour and yeast is sold and the baking season has started. This almost hits the 10% margin. And this is not only toilet paper, of course. So it's the business is going quite well for ICA, but that's the same also for other big food retailers. What is so special about ICA? That's something we need to elaborate a little bit more, even though Johan has tipped that question already. As we said, the stores work quite independent with their retailers. It's a decentralized organizations. And Niklas told me in one of the calls we had before this webinar and in the preparation, he said, you could describe our philosophy as we are traders in collaboration. We collaborate, and together we own ICA, and we set up our local demand, our local offers depending on the local demand. The retailers operate, so to say, in their area with respect to local habits and local producers, but not, of course, not only local producers. The stores have a unique profile, a unique regional and unique local profile, but of course there is a common sense, a common assortment that is the same in all the ICA stores. It doesn't matter if we talk about a Nera or a supermarket or a Quantum. And for all those products that you can find in every single ICA store, there is something that's called AOB, an automatic order system that you might recognize from other retailers, maybe in Austria or in other countries in Europe. And you obviously want to end up with your article, with your product in the AOB, because then it will be automatically reordered when it needs to be refilled. But as Johan already mentioned, there are different shortcuts, alternatives to get into the market. And he mentioned that you shouldn't maybe set all your hopes on the huge retailers. I wouldn't go so far, but I would invite you to see different aspects or an alternative to get into ICA. There is, of course, the option to contact ICA Central. It's not impossible, and the management of ICA, even though it's a hell of a ride, I think Johan said, but the management of ICA obviously says that's not impossible. It's not so tricky. But the sales managers from bottom up, like Niklas say, well, you should take another way. Why don't you recommend them to do like this? It's difficult to place a product in the central assortment. That's why you need to convince local buyers like Niklas or others. And we have quite an experience also in our office here with some of you that we supported in this in this strategy. So producers need to convince local buyers in a way, and as one solution could be then that you start with one retailer and try to expand. So you find a supplier or a contractor, or even you can start a cooperation with a supplier that has already himself or herself a product in the assortment. And last but not least, I said that already, you can count on our support as a link between both sides, but we can only be we can support you, but we obviously do not have listings at ICA. It is a long journey. I think we agree on we all agree on this question, but the grassroots marketing to start with one store with a goal to expand might be worth it. Big brands, of course, can use central demonstration days, for instance, that are held on a weekly basis even in ICA central organization. And then we didn't even mention this, but it's still there and it's gaining importance. The thing is called private label. It continues to grow, and ICA has 4 different aspects or 4 different groups, so to say. For the lower price segment, it's ICA Basic. For the higher price, it's ICA Selection. And then you have the green products for I Love Eco. And of course, you can get in touch also with sales manager on occasions like trade fairs. And that's one of the reasons why we hope so much that we will be able to have a Nordic Organic Food Fair, but also other fairs in the course of the coming year. To sum up this little presentation about ICA, I think we have already learned also from the slides that Johan has presented. There are a bunch of different possibilities and opportunities to get into the Swedish market. You should not only think about the big retailers, but of course they are there and they have an importance. But there are alternatives how to get into the market. There are new technological inventions that you will find in the slides from Johan. And then what I focused on now is the alternative way into the ICA assortment. And that's you could describe it as the bottom up, from the bottom to top, and not to contact the central organization of ICA. You can still do that, but it might be easier and faster to come into the ICA assortment via one of the local stores. You have to bear in mind that it might be needed to overcome a threshold of about 10 stores, maybe, depending on the product, depending on the size of the stores. And you will still have to continue to market your product. You didn't reach the finish line just because you were lucky to get a listing in one regional ICA store. So that's part of the game, so to say. And with this, I think we are ready to learn more about the Swedish consumer. What do you have to bear in mind when thinking about the Swedish consumer and his attitudes and behaviors? And with this, I will hand over to Maria Vanauskas from Business Sweden, who will give us some further information about this. Welcome, Maria.
Thank you very much. So my name is Maria Vanauskas. I'm working at Business Sweden, which is the organization promoting Swedish exports and attracting foreign investments into Sweden. And my work within this organization, I am the global manager for the Try Swedish Export program. We are focusing apparently on food and food export, and we are also looking into attracting food companies or investors to Sweden. So I'm happy that both Johan and Joachim has dwelled upon the ways to enter the Swedish market, the retailers, offline and online, where I will not touch upon that. I can just say that still, I mean, the physical retail is the most important channel for or the way for Swedish consumers to buy food. but we see also since the COVID-19 an increase in online food sales. Okay, so what I will cover in this presentation is an overview then of the Swedish food consumer, the food consumption and how it has changed over the last decades, and also what we cannot source everything from Sweden. So we import quite a lot of food and primary products. So Sweden is actually a net importer of food. We import more than we export. And looking forward and into the future, I will also mention about the hottest consumer trends from now and into the future, according to the Swedish food industry. So they are focusing on certain trends and adapting to them when they produce food. So let's have a look at the Swedish consumer decision drivers. Johan mentioned some of them already, and I can just say that I mean, what you can say about the Swedish consumer is that they are curious, and we are very interested in new food trends. We are a people that are globally very open. We have been traveling a lot, and we also have, as Johan mentioned, more multicultural consumer group now, with all people coming into Sweden and starting a new life here. There is also a very people are very conscious about health nowadays, and this is a healthy lifestyle, both as for eating and drinking healthy, and also, of course, exercising and being out in doing exercises. And it's a growing trend. And also with the climate changes, of course, there is, as everywhere nowadays, a growing awareness of the food's carbon footprint. So there are producers that mention on the packaging, for instance, what is the carbon footprint of this product? What has it been in order to produce it? And they mention it on the package, and that is something that consumers also, they can choose products from that, having that fact available. And then we see also, and maybe that has been triggered by the COVID-19, a growing interest for locally produced food. We see that crisis, I mean, what crisis means, that you have to have a certain, you have to have the security of being able to support the country with food. So of course that is one reason for the growing interest in locally produced food. The other is also the carbon footprint as well, and the awareness of what does it mean to send food all over the planet. Maybe we should strive to produce more within Sweden. And actually, Sweden is one of the countries in Europe with the least, how do you say, percentage. We cannot survive long without importing food. That is the case. So this is, of course, something that people are aware of, and that there are a lot of things going on within the Swedish food industry to invent and to innovate and to find new ways of growing growing primary products locally. Plant-based and vegetarian food and vegan food is also something that there is a growing interest for among the consumers. Organic food, that was a trend a couple of years ago. It was the consumption of organic food really doubled, and it was a huge interest in this. We see that this has still an interest, and it's still a focus for many consumers in Sweden, but the curve it's not increasing like before. It's actually flattened out a bit, but it's still there. But now it's like it's vegan and plant-based is more in the focus of the consumer's mind than organic, but it's still important. I would say also, we mentioned that ethical eating, it's important. Where is the food and how is the food produced? Fair trade is also very strong within the consumer's mind. Convenience, on-the-go products has been and is important. There's less time to eat and sit down for a long time. Then you want to grab something, and that should be healthy as well. That is also something that is important for the consumers. But still, we can see also that price plays a role, even if there are a group of Swedish consumers that they are prepared to pay more for the food, for the healthy food. There still is a group that for whom it's important that the price is not too high. I would say also something which is what the Swedes like. They strive to a healthy lifestyle, but something they have difficulties in not having access to, that is sweets and candy. That is, I think Swedish consumers are one of the world's most, we eat a lot of candy in this country. This is, of course, not so healthy, but still, that's a fact. Having a look at the food consumption and the changes of the consumption the last decades in Sweden. In summary, we can say that meat, dairy products, vegetables, and fruit stands for half of the food consumption in Sweden, followed by bread, cereals, and sweets. And the total food sales 2019 was 305 billion Swedish crowns. And that is an increase with 3% compared to the year before. And of these 3%, the price increase stands for 2.8%, and the volume increase 0.2%. We will see by the end of 2020 a further increase in the sales, of course, in the retail sales. As also mentioned before, where we have the food service sector closing down more or less, or very restricted, and the retail sales increasing. Anyhow, so the meat consumption, the total consumption of meat increased over a period of 1980 to 2018 with 32% to 84 kilos per person and year. And that is really, means that we are also, as we are eating a lot of candy, we're also eating a lot of meat still. Chicken was the meat with the highest increase during this period. But we see a change here. So since 2016, meat consumption is decreasing. And of course, this goes with the awareness of the carbon footprint and the health issues. And we have seen also during the last decades, we have gone from many product groups we have seen a long-term development from primary food products to more refined products. Total consumption of sugar and syrup, for instance, has varied between 38 to 49 kilos per person and year during this period of 1980 to 2018, while direct consumption of sugar, such as powdered sugar, has decreased substantially. At the same time, direct consumption of chocolate and confectionery and soft drinks and cider has increased. So even though that increase of those categories was less strong after 2000, and the same development pattern we can see among the categories like potatoes, bread, and cereals, from primary products to more refined products. As for the dairy category, during the period of 1980 to 2018, the consumption of milk decreased with 45%, while cheese consumption increased. And for vegetables, we increased the consumption with as much as 88%, and fruit with 19% compared to earlier decades. So this is a trend. Let's see. So if we look into the sales within retail and those categories, how are they positioned? Then you can see here that the meat category is high. And then we have the milk and cheese and egg categories following, and bread, cereals. Then come the sugar products, refined products, and vegetables, wine consumption, fruit sales, fruit, water, and non-alcoholic beverage. And then we have fish and other products. That is the percentage within the retail sales per category. And as I said earlier, we cannot source everything from Sweden, so we have to import it. And we are a net importer, importing food, and those figures are from 2019. We imported food for 164.1 billion SEK last year, and we exported for 97.5 billion SEK. This is included the fish. I would say that there's something with the fish here I want to clear out, and that is that what we are exporting when we talk about fish is actually Norwegian salmon that travels through Sweden and then is exported from Sweden. But it's not refined, or we are not producing it in the country. But anyhow, so what we import here, then it's the fish then from Norway and then going out to as an export, re-export. And then we have the other big categories, fruit and vegetables. Then we have drink, meat, dairy products, coffee and tea, and cereals. So those are the big importing categories into Sweden. See here. And last, I want to say something about the consumer trends in Sweden as perceived by the Swedish food producers. So what they are doing when they are developing new products and innovate, they are looking into those trends. They perceive that this is the most important trends for the consumers, not only in Sweden, but globally as well. But so they see locally produced, as I say, that is very important for the Swedish consumer, the healthy food. I mentioned that before, sustainability and climate footprint, vegetarian alternatives. And then it's also important for premium, it's important with premium products, high quality, and produced in a how do you say, in sustainable way. Ready-made food is also a trend which they are focusing on. Private label is another. Protein-rich alternatives, meat replacement, less sugar content, that is also growing importance. Free from additive products, organic products, low price for the group that really this means much, and then free from products like gluten-free or lactose-free. So this is the Swedish food producers' focus. And as I say, that is primarily for the Swedish consumer, but also the big Swedish producers, of course, are looking into the global market as well. And those are big trends as they see them. So with that, I would like to finish this overview and hand over to Matilda Danetun at Systembolaget.
Thank you very much, Maria. Good morning. Okay, so I'm going to talk about Austrian wine and Systembolaget. So I am Matilda Danetun. I'm the new buyer for Austria since the end of January in this lovely year of 2020, which hasn't been easy for any of us. Besides Austria, I also take care of Africa and Asia, but for obvious reasons, South Africa and Austria are my main focus and my biggest origins. At Systembolaget, we are 11 buyers in total. We're 7 that buy wine, and 2 that buys beer, and 1 that buys spirits. And then we have 1 who buys locally produced Swedish beverages, which basically is beer and spirits mainly. I have a background in languages and literature to begin with, but then I got stuck with wine at university while working extra at some of our stores at Systembolaget. And Systembolaget is a state-owned retail monopoly. And we have a vision that is a society in which alcoholic beverages are enjoyed with due regard for health considerations so that no one is harmed. We have an assignment from the Swedish government that means that we're not only supposed to sell alcohol, we're also supposed to communicate to the Swedish public on the risks of consuming alcohol as well. And we have some mandate means in which we do this, which is that we have somewhat of a limited access through the number of stores that we have. Had we been a private company, obviously, we could have had a lot more stores than we do, with the sole goal to sell as much as possible, which is not really what our aim is. We also have somewhat restricted opening hours. For example, we're closed on Sundays and Saturday nights, and some sales regulation in terms of that we do not sell to people who are visibly under the influence of alcohol, for example. We are also brand neutral, so our staff, they don't solely recommend one producer or keep going back to the same wine and insist on the customers buying that wine in particular. They have to mix it up. And we're also quite famous, actually, for our customer service. The Swedish public, they like our staff. They're well educated when it comes to food and drinks, and they're really nice. Systembolaget in brief. We've been around since 1955. We have 446 stores right now. We also have 500 agents where people can order products to and pick them up at their local food store, for example. Almost 6,000 employees. And we're one of the world's largest wine, beer, and spirits retailers. What's important for you guys to know is that we do not buy anything on our own straight from the producers, but we work with 900 Swedish suppliers or importers that we buy from. So as a foreign wine producer, you do need to be working with one of these in order for me to buy anything from you. So then you get in touch with your Swedish supplier and you say, I have this wine, and then they get in touch with me and they say, if you want to try this wine, and so forth. So that's how that works. In total, we have about 20,000 articles and about 2,600 of them is in our fixed or ordinary range. The assortment is divided into three parts. We have the fixed or the ordinary range, which is we launch news 4 times a year in March, June, September, and December. And it gets evaluated and twice a year, and distribution is based on demand for the different products. We also have a temporary range, which consists of more exclusive wines, seasonal products, for example, beer for Christmas, and local products, and it can be anything from extremely small scale to almost half of the stores that we have. And then we have the order range, where the suppliers, they have more products than I have the chance to buy that they offer for restaurants, for example. So they can place them on our webpage or in the order assortment, and then you can log on to systembolaget.se and you can order them through our suppliers, basically, as well. Yes. And when we, as buyers, when we look to buy products for the fixed range, especially, we talk to producers. Normal years, we travel a lot. We go to fairs, and so forth. We talk to the producers themselves. We read up on trends. We talk to the suppliers. We look at, do we need to broaden the assortment? Do we have any? What do we lack? What are we missing? And then we make a launch plan that we put up there, and the suppliers usually come back to us and they say, this is a good idea, this is less of a good idea, and so forth. We go back and forth with that. And then we specify tenders. For example, right now we're looking for a Pinot Noir from Austria. And then the suppliers go to their producers and ask them, okay, what do you have and what can we offer? Yes. And for the fixed and the bigger temporary volume range, where we buy the bigger volumes of wine, we have tender tastings, blind tastings, where we are 3 approved tasters per session. The purchaser in question is present and does the introduction. This is entirely blind. So once we've had the introduction, we turn our backs to each other. It's silent, and then we hand out points based on how well the different wines matches the taste profile and quality in terms of obviously depending on the price level that we ask for. And then we step out of the room and we find out due to points which wine score the highest, and that wine gets to be launched in the fixed range. The temporary assortment, the most important part of that, consists of the larger volume range and the more exclusive range. And we don't have any launch plans for these two, but for the volume range, we do have tenders, and they can be distributed to a larger number of stores. And that's also obviously something that we blind taste. And depending on if the sales goal, the set goal, it can be relaunched again. But for example, for the exclusive range, sometimes we buy only like 72 bottles, and it's solely launched online, for example, on the webpage or in like 3 of our bigger wine cellar stores, or sometimes up to 50. Sometimes we buy like 1,800 wines for that range. Then for the exclusive range, that's when the supplier, they email me or they call me and they ask me, okay, I have this wine, do you want to taste it? And then I say, yes, please, or I say no, because, you know, it's not a fit, or I've already bought something along this. And so that's based on that the buyer in question, we try the wines and we buy for that range. Yes, and I'm so happy that it seems that we all share the same picture when it comes to consumer trends and the Swedish consumer right now, because as many of the previous lecturers have mentioned, Swedes are very into green and local products. It's health, it's wellness. It's a lot about the address behind the brand. Also for wine producers, they want to know, what's your vision? What do you do with your wine? How do you treat your workers in the vineyard? What's your motto even? How do you view the carbon footprint aspect of the wine industry? And so forth, all of that. And also even more with COVID, convenience, buying online. They go to Instagram, they look at wine reviewers actually on Instagram as well. Sparkling wine is big, non-alcoholic beverages is big, craft beer, rosé wine. And it can basically, all of this can be somewhat summed up in authenticity. They want things to be authentic, even wine. So Austria at Systembolaget, it's going really well, actually. It's a fun country to have and to be in charge of. Most Swedish consumers are familiar with Austria as a really good quality white wine country, mostly. Grüner Veltliner and Riesling and firsthand are the grapes that people know the most, but there is an increasing interest in other varieties as well, including Pinot Noir. Austria at Systembolaget is the 14th biggest country, selling 156 million liters last year. And it's constantly increasing actually within each segment. Places as top 10 for sales within temporary exclusive assortment, which means that even more so, that clique of customers who go to the exclusive temporary range, they are very aware of that Austria equals quality, which is great. And also top 5 for organic wines, which is also exciting. And then some bigger, but also a few small and exclusive producers tend to dominate. So basically, if you found a Grüner Veltliner from a producer, you're also more willing to try their Riesling and then to try their Pinot Noir, for example. Yes, just some current numbers and my perspective on when I buy things, mostly for the more exclusive temporary range. Currently, we do have 268 Austrian wines in total, 24 in the fixed range, 48, twice as many, in the temporary, and 196 in the order range available for ordering through our webpage as well. Through the suppliers. Basically, the entry-level wines within mostly the fixed range consist of Grüner, Riesling, some rosé wine, and Pinot Noir. And when I look at what I buy for the exclusive and sometimes the larger volume range temporarily, it's a mixture of on the one side, Grüner and Riesling from top producers, more famous ones, which generally does really well. But then also lately, there's a big interest in natural wines, white, red, orange, you name it, pet nut, doesn't matter what origin, it sells really well in Sweden. And anyone under 35, I would say, is very interested in new or modern design labels on wine bottles. It pops on the shelf and it makes them choose that. They like the story behind it. They like the pure fruit expression and focus, and some bit of a funkiness too. So I divide basically what I buy for the temporary range in between classic greener Riesling and more new up and coming things for the younger generation, mostly, if I am to be prejudiced. Okay, that sort of sums it up. That would be my email address. And as I said, I mean, obviously I can't buy wines straight from you, but I am entirely grateful if you want to update me on your business or the trends in general in Austria when it comes to wine or any other suggestions. So that's where I'm at. Okay, so Joachim, I think back to you.
Here I am. Thank you, Matilda, for this fantastic presentation. And before we go, we have 13 minutes for Q&A, and I would like to invite all the other presenters to come back and switch on the cameras for the questions. Austria obviously is a fun country, as Matilda mentioned, to work with. And there have been a number of questions for Matilda and about Systembolaget, obviously, because there I saw already in the list of the companies that registered, there are some wine growers. One is about contact details. I think it's okay if they just get in touch with you directly. It's, I think, about contact details, whom to talk to at Systembolaget when it comes to spirits. So would that be fine if we just forward your contact details, or if that person just gets in touch with you directly and you can do the rest?
I don't spirits, obviously, but I do know which one of my colleagues to forward it to. So yeah, that's fine.
Great, thank you. And then another question about Austrian wines or Austrian spirits as well. Spirits, I think we leave for your colleague, but wines, is Systembolaget also selling alcohol-free wine?
Yes, we are.
So there, you elaborated on the alcohol-free segment or segment in your assortment, right? So there, if I may add, not only alcohol-free wines, but there is a huge, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, an even growing assortment or part of the assortment in the at Systembolaget when it comes to non-alcoholic beverages.
Definitely, yes.
Then we have another question that I maybe Johan or Maria can help me with answering. Will Swedish trade partners accept Austrian certificates regarding organic food production? If not, what Swedish institutions would be recommendable to get certified locally? Is that something that is too specific as a question, and we can easily handle it after the webinar? But if you have ideas, please feel free to comment on that, Johan.
Joachim, I think that's something for you experts to handle. A very common one is Krav, which is the local certificate for organic stuff, right? But I would stress that it's I don't know if those certifications is the way to go. I think it's more, you mentioned the word funky. I think if you look at a city like Stockholm, for instance, it's easily the most hipster city in Europe, and really wishes it was Brooklyn. And if you come in and project some funkiness into things, that might be even more important than the eco brand. And something that sticks out in Systembolaget's shelves is, of course, something called, I think it's Butcher's Choice, right, Matilda? Or Butcher's Selective Butcher's Choice.
The butcher.
With a butchering pig on the front of it. And that's not just being an excellent wine, it really sticks out as being funky in other aspects as well. And I think a good example to look at.
Okay, great, thank you.
But then you have, sorry, Maria here, do you have the EU certification for organic, the EU leaf? That is something that works in Sweden, of course.
That's valid throughout the European Union, right?
Yes, exactly.
maybe I can add one more question to Matilda. Is there a difference of an agent or a supplier you are working with? Is there a difference between an agent or a supplier? Because you mentioned, I think, both terms in your presentation.
Yeah. I think I said supplier or importer, but that sometimes we call them agents too. No, I wouldn't know. It's basically a Swedish registered company which imports wine or spirits and beer and so forth. So I think even there's maybe I could even find a link and email to you. I think there's actually a Swedish webpage where we have like a registration of a lot of Swedish agents or suppliers that you can browse through and get in touch with. Yeah.
Thank you, Matilda. I think we also have such a list that we can, of course, provide after the webinar. I would like to, as I don't see any further questions at the moment, I would like to ask something myself to Johan. As you were stressing a lot the intersection between food and technological inventions, do you see that the algorithm will determine what we will eat soon?
Yes, absolutely. So, I mean, what's happening now is that we see a major shift from, traditional way of selling food, where you're essentially you're a victim of the big retailers. They decide what you put in your food baskets, right? In the future, in order to save the planet and ourselves on it, as well as for our health reasons, we are getting more and more into various types of algorithms that help us decide what to eat. Whether that is recipe making, which is kind of the basic ones, to actually connecting our personal devices, gathering our data, and then feeding us with, no, this you should eat or that you shouldn't eat. So a lot of people are getting way more technical about their eating, and way more caring about what they're eating, based on data and based on algorithms. And this is, of course, super important if you're going to go to somebody else than the traditional retailers and ask them for shelf space. If you're going to populate stuff in the online channels, you of course have to have all of that ready at hand, like data, massive amounts of data, massive storytelling, really good pictures, all the things that can populate a good online presence. And mind you, that's going to be key. I mean, I don't think Matilda will buy anything that doesn't have a lot of data. Same goes for all the big retailers or all the other players out there.
Thank you, Johan, for this, for your reply. As always, you give you pack it with quite a density in your replies. I don't see any further questions at the moment, but let me stress that for any further questions, you are welcome to get in touch with us via email, via stockholm@wko.at. Please also visit also our website, wko.at. On the Swedish market, we do regularly publish reports on the sector, but also on the economy in general, and in times of a global pandemic, also on questions like recent travel restrictions, which can also be helpful to be aware of. You will receive today's slides as a presentation, as we mentioned in the very beginning, as in PDF format and as a closed YouTube link, so you can re-watch it. We will send out this email on December 4th, this week, Friday, together with a feedback forum. And obviously, we would be happy to hear back from you to grow even better. Once again, I would like to thank all our experts, Matilda, Maria, Johan, for contributing to this webinar. I think you have given us fantastic presentations, and we are very happy to have you joining today. It was very informative and a great pleasure to have you on board. Then I would like to thank you, the audience, for attending today's webinar on the Swedish food and beverages sector. It is great to see that almost all of you stayed with us from the beginning until the end, that I can see here on my screen throughout the whole webinar. Thank you for your loyalty. We are once again here for you to create the link from Austria to Sweden. This, ladies and gentlemen, concludes today's webinar. I hope you enjoyed it. Take care, and most of all, stay healthy and safe. Thank you very much, and best wishes from Stockholm. Goodbye.
Cheers. Bye.